Of all the Star Wars vehicles with cool names, Star Destroyer, Super Star Destroyer, the Dreadnought class heavy cruiser, there's one that I might like the most. That is the Juggernaut. I don't know if there's another vehicle in Star Wars with a name so befitting its status as the Juggernaut. It was one of the most impressive, fearsome, and I say this in biblical terms, awful vehicles of the Clone Wars. Somewhat surprisingly, considering how radically the design has changed, the Juggernaut is actually an evolution of the ATTE. The vehicle took a lot of what worked, i.e. its heavy armor and smart interior design, scaled it way up, included even more armor, threw some wheels on, and made a bona fide droid-destroying machine. I'd love to play some Oppenheimer music and read the intro to the Juggernaut's incredible cross-sections page. I'll get copyright flagged, so open another tab and you can maybe do it yourself. But here's what it says. Juggernauts are designed to deliver tremendous firepower in order to overwhelm well-shielded military structures, some of which can withstand a lone Juggernaut's barrage for hours. However, with an unshielded target, a Juggernaut can blast the heat of a nuclear bomb into one small spot, creating a blazing fireball. And I mean, besides for its size, which is incredible, I'll get to that in a second, the Juggernaut's most notable feature is probably its sheer amount of firepower. At the front of the vehicle is a massive turreted, rapid repeating heavy laser cannon. Now, the field of view of this weapon would be somewhat limited by its placement on the Juggernaut's head. Honestly, maybe even an asymmetrical cannon on one side of the cockpit could have worked better, but really this is meant for large, hardened targets rather than anything small enough to be handled by the Juggernaut's anti-personnel cannons. In fact, I often talk a lot about how Star Wars vehicles don't do enough to protect their vulnerable bits. You really can't accuse the Juggernaut of that. For one, I often talk about a lack of rear-facing weapons. The Juggernaut has not one, but two twin anti-personnel blaster cannons on the back of the vehicle. Additionally, one design feature I really like is the medium anti-personnel laser cannons, which actually extend from the vehicle's hull. This means it's not as limited in terms of firing arcs as it would be otherwise by the Juggernaut's massive hulking frame. Additionally, in the middle of the vehicle is a powerful, heavy laser cannon. The Incredible Cross-Sections book points out that this has the best all-around view. It's high enough that it can track targets in front of the Juggernaut, it can cover around it, and any blind spots are covered mostly by the other weapons. The only real spot the Juggernaut is not super well protected is right directly in front of it, but I mean, simply drive forward. Like, that's it. Just drive forward and nothing will last in front of it for very long. All of the anti-personnel weapons seem to be retractable. None of this thing needs to do any really tight parallel parking, but additionally, there's also a set of pop-out missile and grenade launchers. I really like these because the grenades can be used to remove targets at the Juggernaut's wheels, because let's be honest, there's not a lot getting through those, while the missiles can be used for hardened, distant enemies. Additionally, the Juggernaut had several spots where clone troopers could actually fire upon their surroundings. Most notably, you've probably seen its extendable scouting tower, but you also need to consider that the Juggernaut is largely used as a troop transport, so it's taking its forces with it. According to the new Essential Guide to Vehicles and Vessels, like the ATTE and the later AT-AT, the Juggernaut is primarily a troop transport. The vehicle can carry 50 troops with all necessary gear. As with the Imperial landing craft, the Juggernaut can be reconfigured to carry speeder bikes, assault speeders, or other small repulsor lift craft, and frequently you'd see Juggernaut accompanied by especially AT-RTs. I do need to note that aforementioned segment from the Essential Guide to Vehicles and Vessels is actually referring to a smaller Juggernaut variant, the earlier A5. The A6, which we've been talking about for most of this video, could carry up to 300 troopers, perhaps even more. Making the Juggernaut's array of weapon systems even more impressive was its advanced sensor tower, which fed information directly to each of the vehicle's 6 gunners. But I mentioned the Juggernaut's extreme size earlier, so let's cover that before going to the other features of the vessel. The Juggernaut was massive, 50 meters long. For comparison, that's about 2.5 times the length of its older brother, the AT-AT. The Incredible Cross-Sections book gives it a listed height of 30 meters. I'm guessing guessing that's with its scout tower fully extended. I've also seen 22 meters, which seems to match proportionally the Juggernaut better. Either way, this thing was an absolute unit. There's no two ways around it. But let's talk about some other features. I talked about the Juggernaut size. Durability-wise, the thing was nearly impenetrable. It was also a wheeled vehicle, and I actually kind of made a mistake earlier on when I was talking that I've just realized, but I'm going to leave it in because I think it's illustrative of a neat point. I talked about the rear of the Juggernaut having those anti-personnel blaster cannons. Really, that's the Juggernaut's front, sort of. The vehicle can operate with almost equal effectiveness in both directions. In fact, both sides of the vehicle have their own dedicated cockpit and crew. The incredible cross-section says on this point specifically, the vehicle can also reverse direction easily, moving equally well in forward and reverse gears. Either cockpit can assume full control, which has led to much debate among Juggernaut clone crews as to which cockpit is the true front end, because no one wants to work in the Juggernaut's ass, apparently. But why the switch to wheels? Well, part of it seems to be durability and the fact that the destruction of a single wheel probably will not cripple the Juggernaut, but the incredible suspension equally allows it to tackle tough terrain, and it can reach a speed of an incredible 200 kilometers per hour. Now, I mean, my van can do that. It shouldn't, but my van also isn't a Juggernaut. The dual cockpit means that it can go in this speed in either direction, even if the Juggernaut has sustained critical damage on one side, as long as the drivetrain remains. The extra surface area of the Juggernaut's wheels also meant that it could more capably navigate certain terrains, especially swampy, marshy, or soft soil areas, and that's because the vehicle's weight is being more evenly distributed compared to a walker, which may at some points only have 1 or 2 points of contact on the ground depending on the model. The Juggernaut was basically a mobile base. Alongside its advanced communications and sensor facilities, it also had an onboard medical station so it could treat wounded clone troopers. So just overall a spectacular vehicle. Now, I do have to note that this video has focused on one specific class of Juggernaut, and that's the Republic's HAVW A6. In both Legends and canon, there's the smaller A5, which is a predecessor, not as well armed, not as well armored, and also subsequent Imperial Juggernauts, but I can talk about those in another video if there's interest. With all that being said, why did the Juggernaut fall out of use seemingly during the days of the Empire? Well, it seems like there's a few factors. For one, the AT-AT, although it had less sophisticated firepower, it seems like it was a more damaging vehicle overall. Those heavy blasters on the AT-AT's chin are just devastating. All of the reactor energy basically is channeled through those, and it just causes a lot of destruction at extremely long range, which is great given the AT-AT's height. I think in some circumstances, the AT-AT's legs are a benefit. In others, you'd want the Juggernaut's wheels. The Empire, for whatever reason, ended up going with the AT-AT, and that would somewhat cost them at the Battle of Hoth, for example, but there are also situations where the flexibility, especially in tight spaces of the AT-AT, like in cities, offers maybe a benefit. The Juggernaut also notoriously required a ton of maintenance, so the Empire generally minimized unit variety in favor of uniformity across the galaxy, so that also probably helps explain why the Juggernaut saw less production. But that's all for today. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Is there a Clone Wars era or Star Wars vehicle generally you'd like to see me cover next? Let me know down in the comments below.